Hey guys, tonight we climb aboard a creaking 18th century pirate ship. The air thick with salt, rum, and a suspiciously banana-scented breeze. The wooden planks groan under your boots as you step onto the deck, and there right by the helm tufted little monkey perches with a look of absolute command. Tiny hands grip the wheel like he owns the ship. One ear is missing, his tail is knotted at the end, and around his neck hangs a small, rusted medallion that was probably stolen from someone far more important. You've just met the ship's unofficial first mate and union mascot. No, really. He even gets his own food share and a hammock. You probably won't survive this journey between tropical fevers, casual sword fights, and the awkward logistics of 40 men sharing one toilet bucket, but at least the monkey's having a good time. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And drop a comment with your location and the local time. I love seeing where and when you're drifting off around the world. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You lean against the ship's worn rail as the monkey makes a high-pitched chittering sound, possibly mocking your hat. His name? Tobias, at least on this ship. Some say he's been on 3 different crews, and each time he adopts a new name, like a fuzzy little con man. Tobias is a tufted capuchin, one of the more intelligent and frankly sassier breeds of monkey, and he seems to understand, at least in spirit, that he's more than just a pet. He's a part of the crew, a symbol, a talisman, and, in some odd way, a mascot for the pirate union, that not-so-secret agreement among privateers that bound them together in loose codes of honor and shared booty. See, pirates weren't just wild drunkards with sabers and slogans. Okay, they were that. But they also had structure-written codes, voting rights, and even healthcare, sort of. And as weird as it sounds, monkeys like Tobias were often seen as more than just shipboard jesters. They were morale boosters, diplomatic icebreakers, and occasionally, slightly terrifying messengers. One French captain's journal from the early 700s mentions a monkey named Jacques, who would imitate sword fights with astonishing accuracy, brandishing a spoon as a saber and screeching victoriously. It's not clear whether Jacques was genuinely talented or whether the crew was just very bored. But either way, Jacques became a sort of mascot. His likeness was scratched into the ship's mast, and his hammock was placed next to the quartermaster's. Mainstream history will tell you about the codes of Bartholomew Roberts, or the Republic of Pirates in Nassau. But few accounts mention the shipboard creatures that became living emblems of those codes, especially monkeys, whose presence offered both companionship and comedy in a world otherwise filled with tedium and terror. And it wasn't just one ship. While parrots get the Hollywood spotlight probably thanks to one very shouty bird in Treasure Island, monkeys were surprisingly common among pirate crews, especially those raiding along the coastlines of West Africa, the Caribbean, and Southeast Asia. Why? Monkeys were portable, intelligent, entertaining, and, let's be honest, kind of cute until they threw something at you. Now, before you assume this was all innocent fun, let's acknowledge the ethical oddness. Pirates acquired monkeys through trade, or, more often, through theft. Coastal traders sometimes sold monkeys in cages alongside exotic birds and spices. Other times, pirates would simply raid a village or merchant vessel and help themselves to the local fauna. It was piracy, after all, not a pet adoption fair. But once on board, the monkey often became more than loot. He became part of the narrative. And sailors specially, pirates loved a good story. Tobias, for instance, is rumored to have chosen his captain by stealing his wig, and refusing to return it until given a bottle of molasses. Did this happen? Who knows? Historians still argue whether monkeys like Tobias were as integrated into shipboard life as journals suggest, or if these tales grew exaggerated with every port visit and round of rum. But the ship's log from the Dancing Widow, dated 1723, contains a short line. Toby bit McGrath's ear off again still outranks him, it seems. You crouch on deck, watching Tobias scamper across the rigging like he's on patrol. The ship's cat glares from a sun-warmed crate, clearly offended by this primate usurper. A parrot squawks jealously from the crow's nest, repeating the phrase, "Captain stinks," a line Tobias probably taught it. This particular ship, like many in its day, observes a code. Not an official pirate law, but a kind of mutual understanding among crewmates. Don't steal from each other, don't lie about the loot, and don't mess with Tobias unless you want your boots filled with mango pulp. At night, the monkey curls up in his hammock ease, a custom monkey-sized hammock right above the captain's quarters. Some ships even gave their mascots a cut of the loot, at least symbolically. One letter from a captured pirate off the Barbary coast noted that the monkey wears a sash of coin and silk, paid in full for services rendered. What services? No one says, but Tobias seems pleased with himself. So, as you drift deeper into this floating world of rogue sailors, salt-crusted hammocks, and unpredictable monkey politics, just remember, you're not alone. That faint chittering you hear in the rigging, that's the Union mascot watching you, judging your posture, and almost definitely plotting to steal your fruit. You wake figuratively, of course, to the sound of a mug clinking against the deck, followed by a soft monkey sneeze. Somewhere off to your right, the quartermaster is arguing with a lanky young deckhand about rum rations and whether or not Tobias should be entitled to a half share. But before we settle that monkey union debate, let's zoom out for a second and consider something weirdly admirable about pirate culture: organization. Sure, it doesn't look organized, what? With all the torn breeches and the absence of shirts, but many pirate crews in the 18th century operated under surprisingly formalized systems. You wouldn't necessarily call it bureaucracy, but it's something. Before a voyage even began, the crew would gather to agree upon a written set of rules known as Articles of Agreement, or simply the Code. These weren't imposed top-down by a captain. They were voted on, ratified, and enforced by the group. It's democracy, but with more eye patches. And among those articles, there were often clauses about equal shares of plunder, behavior on deck, and injury compensation. Lost a leg? That's 600 pieces of 8. Lost an eye? Maybe 100. Lost your dignity during a drinking contest with a capuchin monkey? No compensation, only applause. Now, these articles didn't always mention monkeys, but some private logs and anecdotal crew reports indicate that animal mascots were sometimes included as protected persons on board. One journal from a Spanish privateer intercepted in 1728 reads, "The monkey be not to be struck, save for theft, and even then gentle. That's more legal protection than some sailors got." Historians still argue whether these clauses were symbolic or serious. Were monkeys really seen as members of the pirate union? Or was it just a bit of theatrical language by a board ship's clerk? It's hard to say. But on many ships, these animals were treated with a kind of reverence and, perhaps more crucially, they were seen as morale linchpins. Imagine, you've been at sea for 5 straight weeks. Your shirt's more salt than fabric. The cook is experimenting with fermented fish jam, and the closest thing to entertainment is watching barnacles grow. Suddenly, Tobias does a backflip off a barrel, steals a man's sock, and disappears into the rigging. That's 5 minutes of laughter, 10 if he pelts the sock owner with limes. It's hard to overstate the value of levity when your daily routine involves scurvy and minor mutinies. There's a well-preserved crew ledger from a ship called the Merciful Fancia, laughable name for a band of cutthroats where Caliban the monkey is listed right below the bosun, with a crude sketch of a monkey in a little coat next to his name. Position: Spirit Encouragement Officer. That sounds fake, but it was written in earnest, and the coat, oddly enough, was real, made from fabric scraps and apparently embroidered with tiny gold thread. The monkey was not only a mascot, but a symbol of the crew's identity. Pirates liked flair, not the corporate kind, with enamel pins and birthday cupcakes, more like gold teeth, loud sashes, and the occasional pet monkey in a ruffled collar. The mascot was not just a mood lifter, it was a branding tool. Like flying a unique flag, having a notorious monkey was part of your crew's legend. Dock in a new port, and people remember, oh, those are the lunatics with the monkey who drinks brandy. This extended to power dynamics on board. Captains were elected, at least initially, and those seeking favor might bribe or befriend the monkey as a proxy to the crew. Picture this. 2 rival officers both offer Tobias a treat. He chooses the older one, who is then loudly declared chosen by the beast, and thus spiritually favored. Was this nonsense? Absolutely. Did it affect real decisions? Probably more often than you'd think. And sometimes, monkeys helped resolve tension. During a near fight between 2 Irish crewmates over a spilled mug, Tobias interrupted by sprinting across the deck and pulling down one sailor's pants. Fight averted. Laughter won. Monkey promoted to conflict resolution assistant. That's not to say monkeys were universally adored. One anonymous crew diary complains, "The monkey did bite the gunner again. Methinks he covets his job." But more often than not, they were seen as part of the fragile social web that kept the ship from turning into an absolute disaster. And when it came to punishments, pirates were surprisingly equitable by their standards anyway. If someone mistreated the monkey, the crew sometimes enacted petty retribution. One sailor in 1,731 reportedly locked the ship's monkey in a barrel for a prank. The next day, his own boots were nailed to the mast. Pirate justice wasn't subtle, but it was effective. Meanwhile, Tobias has returned to your side, nibbling on a bit of biscuit someone tossed him. He watches you with bright eyes, full of mischief and secrets. The quartermaster walks past and mutters something about union dues, tossing a wink in the monkey's direction. You get the feeling Tobias runs this place, or at least has enough dirt on everyone to pretend he does. It's not hard to imagine the monkey seated at some imaginary council meeting, paws folded, judging disputes with a long-suffering sigh. He's not just a pet, he's tradition. He's weird pirate justice, comic relief, and emotional support, all bundled into a bitey little package. And as you settle onto a bench, lulled by the rhythm of the waves and the creak of the rigging, you realize something even stranger. This system works, barely, loudly, sometimes with banana-related incidents, but it works. You shift position slightly on the bench, the wood warm beneath you from a lazy sun and centuries of stories. Above you, Tobias swings lazily from a rope, one hand clutching a shriveled mango rind he has no intention of sharing. A parrot squawks something unintelligible and vaguely threatening, but no one pays it any mind. Let's get to the question that's probably been simmering in your half-sleeping brain. Why monkeys? Why not parrots, cats, or goats? Parrots certainly had their day. They were bright, loud, mimicked curse words with flair, and could be bought or bartered in dozens of tropical ports. But here's the thing. Parrots are performers. Monkeys are participants. Whereas a parrot might shout, "Pieces of 8," at an inopportune moment, A monkey might sneak into the quartermaster's quarters, eat his figs, and lock the door from the inside. There's agency there. Mischief. And pirates respected that. Also, monkeys had hands. Tiny, grabby, ever so slightly evil hands. A monkey could open a rum bottle. A monkey could pick a pocket. A monkey could, and sometimes did, reenact the crew's more scandalous dances to howling laughter. Some captains, like Edward Laughing Ned Tomlinson, were reputed to keep not one but 3 monkeys on board, each named after a cardinal sin. The monkeys wore tiny waistcoats, sat beside Ned at meals, and were forbidden from touching the pepper jar after an incident involving a sneeze and a narrowly avoided powder room explosion. While the image of a parrot on the shoulder persists, mostly thanks to Robert Louis Stevenson contemporary, accounts hint that monkeys were the real scene stealers. One Dutch trader's letter home in 1706 bemoaned, "The pirates have taken my silk, my wine, and one of my better shoes. I suspect the monkey took the other." The appeal wasn't just in the hijinks. Monkeys, especially species like capuchins and macaques, displayed uncanny mimicry. They danced when the sailors danced. They mimed swordplay. They'd feign sleep during boring speeches, and then steal the speaker's hat as punctuation. Their humor was natural, absurd, and weirdly human-like, watching a toddler who's also a pickpocket. Historians still debate how widespread monkey ownership was among pirates. It's hard to verify, since ship logs rarely detail the presence of animals unless something went wrong. But in private letters, tavern sketches, and even a few merchant complaints, the monkey pops up again and again, never central to the tale, but always there. A little chaos generator perched on a shoulder, or dangling from a lantern mid-brawl. You might wonder if there was a practical reason like rats. Cats were usually the go-to rat catchers aboard ship, but some claimed that monkeys were surprisingly useful in warning the crew about infestations. They'd hear the tiny scratching in the hull and grow agitated long before anyone else noticed. Whether this was real or just superstition is hard to prove. Then again, pirates were highly superstitious. One old tale told in the spice ports of Madras recounts a monkey named Gopal who saved his entire crew from a rat-borne illness by alerting the cook to spoiled grain. Was it true? Possibly. Was it embellished beyond recognition by the third retelling? Absolutely. And there's this fascinating social layer to consider. Pirates, as outlaws, already lived outside the norms of 18th century society. Why not adopt a creature that mirrored their own unruliness? A monkey wasn't domesticated in the conventional sense. You couldn't train it so much as negotiate with it. That rebellious energy fit neatly into pirate life. Plus, there's a kind of cosmic irony pirates seem to enjoy. Imagine being the scourge of the seas, feared by the crown and every merchant alive. And also, your crewmate is a little animal who throws guava at passing ships. It's the absurdity that kept the terror from becoming unbearable. And let's not forget the fashion. Some monkeys were dressed. Really tiny hats, vests sewn from sailcloth. One tale from Port Royal describes a monkey wearing a powdered wig and a stolen medal who performed inspections of incoming cargo. Did the monkey understand this role? Absolutely not. Did the crew salute him when drunk? Without question. Again, historians are split. Some argue these animal tales are exaggerations meant to humanize or romanticize piracy. But when you comb through enough personal letters, marginal sketches, and graffiti in port taverns, a pattern emerges. Monkeys weren't mere shipboard decor. They were woven into the culture of piracy, part jester, part mascot, part accidental morale officer. You're starting to sense the rhythm now. Tobias climbs down from the rigging with the careful grace of someone who knows he's being watched. He pauses beside you, plucks a crumb from your shirt, and offers a brief note as if to say, "You'll do." A monkey's approval. High praise on this ship. You watch as Tobias scurries off again, possibly to investigate the biscuit stash or practice his bottle-opening skills. Somewhere behind you, a sailor yells that someone's taken the last lemon. The monkey's innocent chirp echoes suspiciously from the galley, and as the waves rise and fall beneath your feet, you find yourself strangely comforted. There's a monkey on this pirate ship. He's been here longer than some of the crew. He knows all the hiding spots, all the secret rations, and every single swear word in 5 languages. He may not write the articles or fire the cannons, but make no mistake. This ship sails, at least in part, by the grace of a small, furry Union mascot with attitude. The sea is calm now, just a lazy slap of water against the hull, and the creak of the rigging like an old man stretching. Tobias is somewhere above you, having claimed a quiet corner of the crow's nest to chew thoughtfully on a stolen button. He's earned it. Probably. You squint into the sunlight and wonder how did monkeys like Tobias actually get here. These creatures weren't bred on ships or picked up at pet stores. So how did 18th century pirates, with all their looting and swearing and questionable hygiene, become monkey owners? The answer lies in coastal trade, opportunism, and a dash of sheer monkey thievery. Let's set the scene. You're a pirate ship making a pit stop along the west coast of Africa, or maybe a bustling port in Madagascar, or a spice town along the Malabar coast of India. You aren't necessarily there to burn and plunder, at least not yet. You're trading for supplies, information, and the occasional exotic curiosity. Monkeys were part of that market. In local bazaars and coastal trading posts, monkeys were often captured and sold alongside parrots, turtles, and strange herbs with bold claims. For the right price or threat, they were yours. Some pirates paid with silver. Others just helped themselves. One Portuguese ship's log from 1714 dryly notes, "Lost 2 barrels of brandy and 1 monkey to visiting pirates. They thanked us." But here's the twist. Pirates didn't just scoop up random monkeys. Some crews were picky. They looked for clever hands, bright eyes, or ones that seemed more mischievous than scared. A monkey who could pick a lock, mimic a gesture, or look unimpressed by cannon fire? Jackpot. Tobias, we're told in this ship's lore, came from a village near Sierra Leone. Captured young, sold by a trader who promised he could read minds. The crew didn't believe it until Tobias stole the navigator's map, shredded only the part they'd just decided to avoid, and dropped the pieces in the captain's boots. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe Tobias just had excellent timing and a flair for narrative. Monkey acquisition wasn't always fair, or clean, or kind. Let's not romanticize it too far. These were stolen creatures, in many cases. Taken from forests and families, bought by men who thought a monkey's antics would liven up long weeks at sea. It's a morally murky part of pirate history. But once on board, the dynamic shifted. Monkeys adapted fast. Most small species, like capuchins and macaques, were intelligent enough to learn routines, navigate ropes, and figure out which barrel contained sugar. They weren't passengers. They became participants. Sometimes a monkey was recruited through more spontaneous means. One story, possibly true, tells of a crew anchored near the coast of what's now Suriname. A capuchin swung aboard during a storm, soaked and shrieking. The crew took it as a sign, named him Oliver, and said he brought luck. They didn't lose a man that voyage, nor a single cask of rum. Coincidence? The crew didn't think so. They carved a tiny chair for Oliver and fed him better than the cabin boy. Historians still argue whether monkey acquisition was driven by superstition, entertainment, or simple boredom. Probably a blend. You're stuck on a floating wooden island with the same 12 faces for months at a time. Wouldn't you want a monkey? And in some rare but well-documented cases, pirates actually trained them. Not in the run this cannon kind of way, but in basic tasks, fetching small items, ringing a bell for meals, even stealing from drunken dock workers. One French monkey, Jules, was supposedly so good at slipping through open windows that the crew of La Belle Fripouille could dock, send him ashore, and await his return with purses, trinkets, and the occasional boot. Did Jules act alone? Did the crew make this up over far too much absinthe? Hard to say, but Jules earned a spot in the ship's oral history, a tiny medal made from a melted down coin. You glance up again at Tobias, who has now stuffed the button into a knot of rope and is watching to see if anyone notices. He has no real need to hide it, but clearly, he enjoys the act of hiding. That's the thing about monkeys. They were never trained soldiers, but they understood theater. In one colonial report from Barbados, a captured pirate was asked what had most shaken his resolve in battle. His answer? The devil monkey grinning from the bowsprit, wearing a red scarf and hissing like a kettle. It wasn't just fear, it was distraction. A well-placed monkey could unsettle the enemy far more than a cannonball. And sometimes, monkeys were the ones who brought luck. During a particularly bad storm, a monkey named Enoch refused to come down from the crow's nest. When the winds died, he descended, pointed toward the sun, and hooted. The captain declared it a sign, and the crew toasted him with watered wine. Enoch reportedly spit it out. You can almost picture the ceremony. Sailors toasting a damp monkey while the sails flap above them, and someone solemnly announcing, "He's a prophet, lads." You shift your weight again, lulled by the warmth and the scent of rope and old tobacco. The ship rocks gently beneath you, and Tobias finally curls into a tight ball beside the mast, eyes half shut, tail twitching just slightly in dreams. He may not know where he came from. He may not know what the articles say, but somehow, this ship is his home now. He earned it. With a stolen spoon, a shredded map, and whatever inscrutable plan he's cooking up next. You've drifted deeper into this ship's strange society now, where the line between human and monkey gets blurrier by the day. Tobias is awake again, just barely lounging in the captain's chair like it was made for him. Which, in a way, it might have been. No one dares move him. One sailor made that mistake last week and spent 2 days finding shrimp in his boots. But let's talk about something delightfully human. Names. Monkeys aboard pirate ships were rarely nameless. In fact, they had some of the most elaborate, ridiculous, and oddly specific names you could imagine, names that reflected the crew's sense of humor, superstition, or very questionable taste. Tobias, for instance, may seem dignified, but other monkeys in pirate lore had names like Captain Fluffbottom, Stinkbeard Jr., and Sir Bites-a-Lot. One ship reportedly named their monkey King George, a not so subtle jab at the actual monarch they were actively pillaging under. These names weren't random. They were personal. Naming the monkey gave the crew a shared inside Jokian in-joke that could lighten the mood during grim days or high tension. Picture 30 grizzled sailors shouting, "Get 'em, Queen Pickle," as a monkey flings an inkwell at a boarding party. How do you not bond over that? Sometimes the names were ironic. A quiet, well-behaved monkey might be dubbed Murder Pete. A loud, aggressive one, Gentle Jeffrey. And then there were names that defy classification entirely, like the infamous Beans. Historians still debate the origin of Beans, a monkey mentioned in at least 4 separate journals from different ships, always associated with spilled rum, vanishing silverware, and an uncanny ability to open padlocks. Was it the same monkey-changing cruise? A series of monkeys named Beans in tribute? Or was Beans just the go-to monkey name of the century? We may never know. But Beans lives on in legend. Beyond the comedy, names served a practical function too. Crews genuinely believed a named animal was more likely to obey her, at least to be reasoned with. After all, if you're yelling, "Stop that!" into the rigging, the monkey's not going to listen. But if you shout, "Horatio, no more lantern oil," well, that's specific. Some ships even held naming ceremonies. A monkey might be given a name at the masthead, with a toast of watered wine and a solemn vow not to let him near the maps again. A 1719 account from a brig called the Blue Pretender describes a monkey named Professor Buttons receiving his title during a moonlit ritual involving song, a stolen clergy robe, and a very confused goat. One imagines the goat didn't stay long. It's worth noting that sailors themselves often had nicknames just as wild. So, in a way, naming the monkey absurdly was part of the larger pirate tradition of crafting identities. You weren't just Thomas, or Edward you were Longtooth, or Clamjack, or Coffin Tom. The monkey, naturally, needed a name to match that energy. Sometimes these names evolved. A monkey might begin as Tiny Jim, and after biting 3 lieutenants and learning to juggle cannonballs, be rebranded the Minister of Chaos. This name shifting mirrors how pirate crews often changed flags, tactics, or even allegiance-cess fluid identity was part of the job. And the naming wasn't always for fun. Monkeys often received honorifics that reflected their behavior in battle. One capuchin, originally called Nubby for reasons best left to the imagination, was renamed General Nubs after surviving a cannon misfire and allegedly alerting the crew by flinging a burning rope overboard before it reached the powder hold. Again, whether this actually happened is unclear, but the crew believed it, and that made it real enough. Monkeys also received titles based on what they stole. A monkey who liked gold buttons might become Lord Gilt. One fond of tobacco pouches, Chimney Jim. And if a monkey regularly made off with the cook's ladle, he might be dubbed Chef. These names stuck. They were written into logs, carved into railings, and whispered in drunken ballads ashore. In fact, a few monkeys became so legendary that taverns in Port Royal and Tortuga reportedly offered drinks named after them. One screaming Tobias, please. A mix of rum, lime, and a splash of vinegar. Sounds awful. Probably was. But again, it's the story that counts. Monkeys became part of the oral tradition of piracy strange mascots, with official-sounding names and a reputation to uphold, just like the ships they sailed on. You glance over at Tobias, who's now examining a compass with exaggerated seriousness. He spins the dial, sniffs it, and tucks it under his arm like a prized relic. You don't ask questions. He clearly has a plan. A passing sailor nods at him with the same deference he gives the quartermaster. "Mornin', Mr. Tobias," he says. Tobias doesn't look up. He's busy. And that's the magic of a good name. It elevates. It turns a mischievous little animal into a legend. Tobias isn't just a monkey. He's Tobias Union Mascot, biscuit thief, accidental navigator, and the reason the galley door now has a lock. As the ship sways gently beneath you and the crew bustles around, you realize that in this strange little floating world, names matter. They carry stories. They hold grudges. They honor the ridiculous. And Tobias, well, he wears his name like a crown. The wind picks up slightly now, billowing the sails with a lazy flap, flap, flap that almost sounds like a lullaby if you let it. Tobias hangs from a rope like a drunken chandelier ornament, lazily spinning in the breeze. Someone below mutters, "He's on watch," with a straight face. and no one dares contradict it. So far, we've seen how monkeys were brought on board, how they got their names, and how they became beloved, or at least tolerated, members of the crew. But what exactly did these monkeys do all day? Well, the short answer, whatever they wanted. But if we stretch our imaginations a bit and dig into some colorful first-hand accounts, we can piece together a curious little resume of monkey duties, both real and entirely invented by bored pirates. Let's start with the most obvious job: entertainment. Monkeys were walking, climbing, shrieking comedy shows. When the boredom of sea life set in, as it often did during long voyages, the monkey became the crew's unwitting court jester. Tobias, for instance, has a habit of mimicking the captain's hand gestures during morning announcements. The first time, it was funny. The third time, it was insubordination. The 10th time, the captain just started including him in the announcements. Some monkeys learned tricks, not because anyone trained them rigorously, but because they picked things up by watching. One monkey, affectionately known as Chaplain Percy, learned to cross himself every time someone sneezed. Another could fake a limp to guilt the cook into giving up extra rations. Pirates aren't known for high moral standards, but even they had a soft spot for a monkey hobbling around with a dramatic moan. Beyond performance, monkeys also developed roles in games. Dice games, drinking games, and an infamous deck-wide version of hide-and-seek called Find the Biscuit, in which the monkey always won. Tobias has, according to rumor, hidden items so thoroughly that former crewmates are still discovering them years later, buried in forgotten corners of other ships. But monkeys also took on stranger responsibilities. One early 18th century log from the Maiden's Mercy mentions a monkey named Petey, who was in charge of guarding the ship's biscuit barrel. Did Petey succeed? Not exactly. He was caught mid-theft more often than not, but the crew found it hilarious that the biscuit guardian was also the biscuit thief. In a sense, it was performance art, maritime irony. There are reports again, impossible to fully verify, of monkeys acting as lookouts. Not official ones, of course, but it's said that some monkeys would grow agitated when sails appeared on the horizon. Perhaps they noticed the change in crew mood, or perhaps they simply didn't like unfamiliar shapes. In one tale, a monkey shrieked for an hour before a Navy ship appeared behind a fog bank. The captain swore the monkey saved them. The monkey, meanwhile, was rewarded with a string of beads and an entire coconut. Historians still argue whether this lookout role was exaggerated, or if the monkeys simply provided a kind of emotional barometer. They picked up on tension, mimicked urgency, and sometimes spooked the crew into action. A nervous monkey swinging wildly through the rigging was enough to make even the laziest deckhand glance toward the horizon. Monkeys were also used, albeit unintentionally, as distraction tools during boarding actions. Not in the tactical sense, but more in the wait, Is that a monkey in a waistcoat sort of way? Picture a hostile merchant ship under attack, only to see a capuchin hurling mango pits from the rigging like a miniature artillery officer. Confusion? Definitely. Laughter? Occasionally. Tactical advantage? Possibly. There's one tale almost certainly exaggerated of a monkey who captured a ship's flag by shimmying up the mast, ripping it down, and parading around with it like a victory sash. This story appears in at least 3 versions, each more dramatic than the last. In one, the monkey is knighted. In another, he's voted into captaincy during a mutiny. In the third, he simply eats the flag and falls asleep. Still, Tobias seems to have embraced his duties. Every few hours, he does his round scurrying from bow to stern, inspecting barrels, peeking into hammocks, and occasionally thwacking an unsuspecting foot with a spoon he definitely wasn't given. He knows the ship's rhythm better than half the crew. And monkeys were sometimes unofficial quartermasters. Not the kind that handled charts and weapons, but the kind who hoarded items of interest. Crew members learned to keep track of their socks, rings, and writing quills unless they wanted to negotiate with Tobias to get them back. Pirates could be bribed with rum. Tobias? Only with figs. Or attention. One privateer's letter from 1726 describes a monkey who organized a stash of shiny items beneath the captain's bunk buttons. Thimbles, coins, and a very confused crab. When discovered, the crew simply laughed, named the stash the Monkey Vault, and added offerings to it for luck before major battles. Of course, not every monkey duty was noble. Sometimes they simply caused chaos. There's the infamous tale of a monkey who learned to untie knots. At first, charming, then problematic, especially when it led to a small rowboat floating away mid-harbor, with Tobias aboard, clutching a hatchet he definitely should not have had. The boat was retrieved. Tobias scolded, pouted in the rigging for 3 days. And yet, despite the occasional chaos, monkeys like Tobias remained on board not just as pets, but as part of the ship's living routine. They were unpredictable, which somehow made them reliable, especially on a ship where monotony could drive a man to madness. Now, Tobias nestles beside a coil of rope and begins carefully rearranging it into some kind of banana-shaped spiral. Is it art? A message? A trap? Probably. He looks up at you, eyes shining with a mix of curiosity and challenge. You blink slowly. So does he. And for a moment, it's hard to tell which one of you is in charge. The sun dips low now, casting a warm, syrupy glow over the ship. Shadows stretch long across the deck, and the air carries that peculiar sea blend of salt, rope tar, and something faintly banana adjacent. Tobias sits near the helm, inspecting a spoon with the seriousness of a jeweler evaluating a diamond. All is calm, almost suspiciously calm. Because, my friend, not every moment with a monkey mascot was smooth sailing. In fact, for all their charm and charisma, monkeys could be absolute chaos goblins with a fondness for sabotage, shrieking tantrums, and the occasional mutiny accidental or otherwise. Let's start with the tantrums. Most monkeys aboard pirate ships weren't trained or tamed in the modern sense. They were smart, emotionally reactive, and often quite dramatic. A capuchin denied his favorite snack, could go from cuddly to apocalyptic in seconds. One journal from a ship called the Salty Widow notes, Percival, enraged by absence of citrus, flung ink pot into the soup. Cook furious. Percival indifferent. Yes, even monkeys had culinary opinions. And then there was the noise. A happy monkey made cute little chirps. A mildly annoyed monkey, loud hoots. An enraged monkey mid-tantrum. Imagine a banshee and a goose in a pillowcase, screaming through a trumpet. Now, multiply it by 3 and add flying objects. At sea, noise traveled. Fast. More than one ship likely gave away its position because Tobias decided he did not like that new blanket. Monkeys could also hold grudges. One unfortunate crewman known only as Lanky Ned made the mistake of mocking Tobias during a card game. The next morning, his trousers had mysteriously vanished. His boots were filled with sardine guts, and Tobias was found curled up next to the ship's bell, whistling like a human. Coincidence? Unlikely. Monkeys remember. Historians still argue whether such incidents were strategic or simply chaos. Did Tobias plan revenge? Or did he just enjoy confusing humans? Either way, the result was the same. No one messed with the monkey twice. And sometimes, things escalated beyond pranks. Take the case of the Groaning Gull, a modest brig crewed mostly by Scots and famously captained by a man named Silas Grog. Their monkey, Balthazar, was described as small, golden-furred, and full of dangerous ideas. Balthazar reportedly developed a taste for gunpowder, which should not be on any monkey's diet, and once tried to light a fuse using a stolen lantern. The cannon misfired. No one was hurt, but the entire foredeck had to be revarnished. From that point on, Balthazar was kept on a leash. He escaped it 12 times. Even more dramatic was the time a ship's monkey caused what the crew swore was a mutiny. In 1735, aboard the Pride of Cawdor, a monkey named Erasmus allegedly stole the captain's prized ring, ran along the rigging, and dropped it into the soup kettle. The captain, famous for his temper, accused the cook of conspiracy, dismissed him, and installed a new one. This angered the crew, who had liked the original cook. The men demanded his reinstatement. Tensions rose. Swords were drawn, voices raised. All because Erasmus fancied shiny things and had poor depth perception. Was it truly a mutiny? No shots were fired. But the ship did float adrift for 3 days while the officers argued. The monkey, completely unfazed, spent most of this period learning to open bottles with his teeth. And then there are the incidents. One monkey, aptly named Riot, reportedly released all the chickens from their coop during a storm. The chickens panicked. The crew panicked. The storm panicked. One sailor broke his arm. The chickens were never found. Riot received a gentle slap on the paw and a whole banana, as no one could prove malicious intent. This may sound like mayhem, but aboard a pirate ship, even mischief had its place. In a world where sudden death and grinding boredom were daily companions, the monkeys' antics offered levitative when they caused minor disasters. Pirates didn't live tidy lives. They respected things that thrived in chaos. Like themselves. Like monkeys. Still, limits were tested. Some captains tried to discipline their monkeys. A few wrote about placing the offending animal in a tiny brig, or temporarily revoking hammock privileges. These punishments rarely stuck, one captain noted. After locking Beans below deck for thieving, he escaped via porthole, stole my pipe, and led the cat in rebellion. I have since reconsidered his imprisonment. Even pirates knew, you can't truly punish a monkey. You can only negotiate, or give it a biscuit and hope for the best. There were rare times when a monkey pushed too far. A crew in 1,742 reportedly voted to demascot their monkey, a macaque named Jeffrey, after he tore up 2 flags, bit the quartermaster, and flung several gold coins overboard. For the sport of it, Jeffrey was confined to land on their next port stop and left in the care of a bemused tavern keeper. He thrived. The tavern renamed itself the Monkey's Gold, and Jeffrey lived another 10 years as a local legend and unofficial bartender. So yes, not all monkey tales ended in happy harmony. But even when they left chaos in their wake, monkeys like Tobias remained woven into the pirate's story. They were in many ways living mirror small, clever, chaotic creatures that thrived in the absurdity of life at sea. You glance again at Tobias, who's now pulling a small scarf over his head like a pirate queen. He looks deeply serious. You suspect he's preparing for another official inspection. He struts past you with an air of responsibility, completely ignoring a sailor tripping over a barrel behind him. He pauses at the galley door, sniffs the air, and taps once hard in the wood. Then he vanishes inside. What will he do in there? No one knows. Will it cause a minor crisis? Almost certainly. But one thing is clear. This ship runs on more than wind and sailcloth. It runs on stories, on rituals, on a monkey's unpredictable schedule. The sky turns from gold to bruised lavender as evening rolls in. Lanterns flicker to life, casting puddles of soft light across the deck. And somewhere below, the cook mutters about a missing ladle. Again, you already know where it's gone. You hear the clink of metal, and there's Tobias, perched on a crate, lovingly polishing that ladle with the hem of someone's stolen shirt. It's not theft, it's tradition. But let's pause for a moment and talk about something oddly tender. How pirates actually cared for their monkeys. Because for all the antics, the drama, and the occasional poultry-related disaster, these weren't just novelties or mascots. They were crewmates. And crewmates, even the fuzzy ones, needed looking after. So, what did monkey care look like on an 18th century pirate ship? First and foremost, food. Tobias doesn't live on vibes and powdered wigs alone. He needs fruit, nuts, the occasional crust of bread, and, when things get a bit too piratey, rum-soaked biscuit. Monkeys weren't fed scraps like rats. In fact, some logs suggest they got better food than the newer deckhands. Ripe fruit was always a treat, and if a barrel of apples was found during a raid, you could bet Tobias got first pick. One ship's manifest from 1,727 even includes a line item. For Tobias figs, sweet bread, small clove jar. That's more detailed than what some human crew members received. Of course, this affection didn't spring from nowhere. Monkeys had to be kept happy to avoid, well, everything we covered in the last section. A monkey in a foul mood could turn a peaceful morning into a full-blown, ship-wide soap opera. And then there was grooming. Pirates didn't exactly bathe daily unless you count rainstorms or falling overboard. But monkey maintenance was another story. Crews brushed them, picked off bugs, and cleaned their little hands, especially after the ink pot incident, a story that, even now, stains half the mainmast. Some monkeys even had assigned handlers, whose only job was to make sure the mascot didn't end up in the powder room or chewing the maps again. One surviving crew log from the Golden Shrimp, yes, really, mentions a monkey named Pesto who required daily brushing, or he would howl and fling cups. The captain allowed 15 minutes of grooming per morning. It was listed in the schedule, right under Polish cutlasses and avoid the parrot. Historians still debate whether this grooming was practical or symbolic. Was it truly necessary? Or had the monkey become such an emotional fixture that brushing him offered the crew a sense of normalcy, something soft and manageable in a world otherwise full of danger and toothaches? Monkeys also got special sleeping arrangements. Tobias, for example, has a hammock. Tiny, tidy, slightly moth-eaten. Suspended near the officers' quarters, it swings gently in the night breeze. Other ships simply let monkeys bunk with their favorite crewmates. They often picked the warmest, quietest man, curled up against a beard, and refused to move. If that man rolled over, too bad. The monkey bites. Of course, hammocks came with challenges. Monkeys don't understand stay in bed. They understand leap from this aerial swing into that open barrel of pickled eggs. And they do, often with flair. Still, when it came to comfort, monkeys were pampered by pirate standards. Tobias has been spotted wrapped in bits of silk during storms, with a sailor crouched beside him to keep him calm. Monkeys disliked high winds and loud noises, fair enough. So did most of the crew, but the difference was the crew couldn't be bribed with grapes to behave. As for medical care, it was improvisational, to put it kindly. No monkey had a doctor, but a wounded or sick mascot rarely went ignored. Sailors offered bits of crushed herbs, warm rags, and the occasional sip of rum, which probably helped nothing but morale. Some ships had a monkey pouch, a small satchel of bandages, dried fruit, and calming powder, just in case Tobias got too rowdy and fell off the mast. Again, there's a touching letter from a pirate quartermaster to his sister in Jamaica, dated 1733, where he describes Dr. Tobias being under the weather from too much vinegar. He writes, "We gave him rest, mashed peach, and sung him to sleep. The crew remains tense in his absence." Was the crew worried about the monkey, or about what would happen when he recovered? A little of both, probably. Monkeys didn't always make it through voyages, of course. Sea travel was harsh. Illness, storms, and rough handling took their toll. But when a monkey died, the crew didn't shrug it off. There are scattered accounts of funerals, actual, honest-to-goodness funeral shelled for monkey mascots. One account from a Spanish frigate mentions a monkey buried with a tiny wooden sword and 3 coins for the afterlife. And, of course, there were legends. One monkey, Sir Nanners, don't ask, was said to haunt the Crimson Duchess, appearing only when a new captain was about to be chosen. Another, Peepo the Wise, allegedly escaped death multiple times, outliving 4 captains and once surviving a full week on oranges and spite alone. These stories may be exaggerated. Pirates were fond of embellishment, but they speak to something real. Monkeys mattered. Not just as pets, not just as mascots, but as companions. Tobias now sits in a wash basin filled with water and flower petals, courtesy of the cook, who claims he owed the monkey a spa day. After that one time, Tobias warned him about a rotten potato by shoving it down his shirt. They're even now, apparently. The lantern light flickers, the sea rocks gently, and the monkey, freshly cleaned and content, yawns, a tiny, theatrical yawn. You don't often expect tenderness on a pirate ship, but here it is, in the form of a warm bowl, a sleepy monkey, and a dozen hardened men tiptoeing so they don't wake him. The ship glides through the dark now, sails full but quiet, like a floating whisper across the ocean. The stars blink overhead, reflected in the gently rippling water below. Tobias is curled up, tail over his nose, while the crew speaks in low murmurs or snores into hammocks. But make no mistake, this silence, it's temporary, especially when it comes to monkey business. Because tonight, we're getting into the juicy stuff. The politics. Yes, Even pirates had politics. Not the parliament type, mind you, more like whispered deals, shifting loyalties, and the occasional poker game that decided who got the biggest bed. And, oddly enough, monkeys sometimes got tangled up in the middle of it all. Let's begin with something unexpectedly common. Favoritism. Monkeys often had favorite humans, and favorite humans had enemies. That math writes itself. If Tobias adored the quartermaster, but despised the new helmsman, well, that helmsman might find his hat mysteriously filled with molasses. Or worse, replaced with a slightly larger hat, so everyone stared all day. Some monkeys played favorites so obviously that it sparked arguments. A 1,738 ships log from the Drunken Pelican describes a furious row between two crewmen after a monkey named Lionel licked one man's face and threw sand in the other's. The entry ends with, resolved at cards. Lionel remained neutral but smug. Now, let's talk about bribes. Just like any politician worth his salt, monkeys could be bribed. Not with money, of course. Tobias didn't care about gold doubloons. He cared about raisins, or ribbon, or that fancy French cheese one sailor had smuggled from Martinique. Sailors would often curry favor with the monkey to gain social capital. If Tobias liked you, you had an automatic in. If he disliked you, well, you were one spoonful away from being pantsed mid-captain's speech. It wasn't uncommon for crewmates to offer small trinkets to the monkey before a vote. Pirate ships held votes more often than people realize, electing captains, deciding punishments, or determining the next port of call. While monkeys couldn't vote, thank goodness, their opinions still mattered. If the monkey cheered when a name was called, that man got a few extra nods. Historians still argue whether this was superstition or genuine influence. Did pirates really weigh the monkey's reaction when making decisions? Or did they just enjoy the drama of it? Either way, monkey approval had measurable social weight. There's an account from the Sweet Juditha ship, known for elaborate on-board rituals, that describes a moment when two crewmates each tried to win Tobias's favor before a critical vote on dividing captured goods. One gave him a plum, the other a bit of polished amber. Tobias rejected both, marched to the mast, and flung a chamber pot overboard. The crew interpreted it as a call for equal shares. Monkey diplomacy also extended to visitors. When ships docked in foreign ports, monkeys were often the first point of interaction. Local children would flock to them. Traders would offer fruit. In one bizarre case, a diplomatic standoff in St. Kitts was reportedly softened when the pirate monkey handed a Spanish official's wife a flower. The pirates got safe harbor. The monkey got 3 figs and a necklace. These monkeys weren't just ship mascots. They were, at times, living calling cards. Symbols of the crew's eccentricity, unpredictability, and willingness to treat diplomacy like performance art. A monkey could be charming, disarming, or downright terrifying if you were on the receiving end of his dinner plate throwing spree. And in moments of tension within the crew, monkeys were sometimes used as messenger sore, less officially, emotional support pawns. Let's say tensions are high between the captain and the bosun. Instead of a shouting match, the captain sends Tobias over with a scarf. Not a white flag exactly, but a symbolic peace offering. If the monkey doesn't get thrown overboard, it's considered a good sign. If he comes back with a second scarf, a truce. If he comes back with nothing and the bosun's shoes, negotiations are ongoing. These rituals, silly as they seem, mattered. They offered a way to cool tempers and save face. No one wanted to lose a fight with the ship's monkey watching. In more than one account, a monkey was credited with preventing duels. One crew member wrote in his journal, "Had words with Isaac over stolen boots. Tobias leapt between us, shrieking. Duel postponed. Boots never recovered." Monkey theft, it seems, was occasionally useful. Then there's the odd phenomenon of the monkey scapegoat. If something went wrong, especially something weird blaming, the monkey became a kind of shipboard default. Spoons missing? Monkey. Map torn? Monkey. Unexplained sugar crust inside someone's hat? Monkey. Even if he hadn't been in the room. This wasn't always fair, of course. But pirates preferred blaming Tobias to accusing a crewmate. It was the emotional equivalent of kicking the powder barrel instead of your friend. And Tobias, bless him, never seemed to mind. Once, the entire ship's supply of dried mango disappeared overnight. The crew suspected each other. Tensions rose. Fists clenched. Then, someone pointed to Tobias, sitting innocently in the rigging, sticky from head to toe. Peace restored. No questions asked. You hear the creak of a chair now, and there's Tobias again, dragging a small cup by the handle. He stops beside the captain, gently places the cup at his feet, and then scampers away. A peace offering? A threat? Hard to say. The captain laughs, picks up the cup, and toasts the monkey's retreating tail. That's how pirate politics works, you realize is low, theatrical, and just a little bit absurd. In this world, the monkey is both jester and judge. A symbol of power, luck, and the fragile web of relationships that keeps a floating fortress from turning into a brawl-filled disaster. And when things grow tense, there's comfort in knowing Tobias might swing through at just the right moment. Stealing your hat, yes, but also your attention. Changing the mood, shifting the course. He may not hold the compass, but somehow he still keeps this ship on course. Morning again. Or what passes for it out at sea cloud-filtered light. A vague sense of time passing, and the clatter of someone realizing Tobias has rearranged the spoons. Again, the cook curses under his breath. Not at the monkey exactly, but at the abstract idea of trying to run a kitchen with one hand tied behind his back and the other always missing a ladle. But we're not staying aboard today. Not entirely. Because monkeys, like Tobias, weren't just terrors of the rigging. They were also menaces ashore. And oh, the portside hijinks. When a pirate crew hit land, the goals were simple. Resupply, repair, recover from tropical rashes, and spend every coin they hadn't already buried in a random coconut grove. And if you had a monkey on your shoulderer trailing behind you on a length of twinate, changed everything. Port towns in the 18th century were used to seeing strange things. Sailors with tattoos of ships inside ships. Parrots who'd learned only to swear. Merchants selling powdered snake as a miracle cure. But monkeys still turned heads. Especially when they were dressed, or misbehaving, or both. Picture it. You walk into a ramshackle tavern in Tortuga, your boots sticky with spilled ale, and there's Tobias atop the bar, wearing a child's bonnet and sorting playing cards with genuine focus. Around him, sailors cheer. One bets half a week's wages that Tobias will pick the ace. He doesn't. He eats it. Roars of laughter. Drink flows. Monkeys in port were natural icebreakers. They drew attention. Laughter. Sometimes unwanted attention. Too especially when a monkey decided to liberate a necklace, a pie, or an entire table's cutlery. But most folks forgave them. It's hard to stay mad at something with big eyes and better pickpocketing skills than your average street urchin. There are records, some reliable, some wildly questionable, of monkeys causing small riots. One incident in Kingston involved a monkey who stole a preacher's wig during a dockside sermon, leapt onto a fish cart, and led half the gathered crowd on a 3-hour chase through alleys, rooftops, finally into a bakery, where he barricaded himself with loaves and refused to leave until bribed with honey. The bakery forgave him. Sales skyrocketed for a week. Historians still argue whether this was Tobias or one of his many monkey predecessors or imitators. But the point remains. Pirate monkeys made an impression on shore. There's also a curious diplomatic element to these port visits. Monkeys were often the first thing locals noticed about a crew, and depending on the monkey's behavior, it could make or break a negotiation. Some monkeys were trained or naturally inclined to offer gifts upon arrival. A shiny button, a flower, a small stone. It made the crew seem civil, quirky even. Other monkeys, not so much. One French account from Guadeloupe recounts a monkey who greeted a merchant delegation by lobbing mango pits at their hats, then relieving himself in the visiting dignitary's shoe. The delegation still sold the pirates sugar, but raised the prices considerably. Not every port welcomed monkeys either. In strict colonial settlements, particularly those with fragile social orders and fragile governors' monkeys, were banned outright. Signs were sometimes posted, "No pets, monkeys, or muskets in the tavern after dark." A reasonable rule, given the number of reported monkey incidents involving knocked over lanterns, and one very unfortunate chicken coop fire. Still, plenty of places embraced the chaos. In some Caribbean towns, monkeys became celebrities. Children would follow them, toss fruit, and beg for tricks. Sailors taught the monkeys to tip imaginary hats, do clumsy somersaults, or mimic sword duels. One monkey, named Banjo, even had his own little drum. He never played it properly. He mostly sat on it, but the crowd loved it anyway. Monkeys also got gifts. Really. Dockside merchants would offer scraps of silk, dried fruit, even perfume. Not always out of affection, sometimes. They just wanted the monkey to stop stealing, but the result was the same. A monkey returning to the ship, draped in trinkets like a furry, judgmental duchess. Of course, this didn't always go over well. Jealous crew members sometimes resented the monkey's fame. Imagine toiling at sea for months, surviving storms and sea lice, only to watch your mascot get serenaded by a lute player while you're trying to haggle for potatoes. Feelings were bruised. Occasionally, bribes were offered. "If you throw that merchant's hat in the canal," one sailor reportedly whispered to his monkey, "I'll give you my last coconut." He did. The hat flew. The merchant screamed. The coconut was delivered. And sometimes, monkey trouble followed the crew back to the ship. Portside mischief could earn a monkey enemies. There's a sad tale, slightly hilarious, of a monkey named Inspector Flaps, who was barred from re-entering the port of Bridgetown after being accused of repeated disruptions, unauthorized access to merchant goods, and deliberate incitement of poultry. The crew hung a portrait of him in their quarters, beneath the words, "Wanted, Dead, or Adored." Tobias, too, has a reputation. In at least 3 ports, he's been recognized. Once, an old woman threw a sandal at him and shouted something about a stolen earring. Another time, a child offered him a mango and whispered, "Please don't bite my uncle again." Tobias accepted the mango. And then, there's the curious case of Tobias and the governor's daughter. A romantic tale? No. This is not that kind of story. She'd simply never seen a monkey before. And after a few enchanted minutes of watching Tobias steal buttons from her father's uniform, she proclaimed him an artist of chaos. She gave him a sash, pink, silken, embroidered with the word mischief. He wore it for weeks, until it mysteriously vanished during a rainstorm. Rumor has it Tobias hid it inside the ship's biscuit barrel. You sit now by the main mast, watching as Tobias tightrope walks along a beam with something shiny in his teeth. He pauses, looks around, then tucks the object under a coil of rope. His treasure trove grows. The crew doesn't ask questions anymore. They know better. When you live with a monkey long enough, you learn. Don't interrupt the ritual. Don't touch the stash. And never ever underestimate how many people in port will recognize him before they recognize you. He's not just part of the cruise, the legend that docks before you do. The ship is rocking gently now, as though it too is drowsy from the day's journey. The sea whispers around the hull. Someone hums a lullaby up in the rigging, possibly to themselves, possibly to Tobias, who is once again curled atop a sail, grooming his tail with exaggerated flair. But tonight's not about Tobias. Not entirely. Tonight, we go into legend. Because even pirates told stories. Around campfires on stolen beaches, in the dark corners of rum-soaked taverns, or whispered during midnight watches under skies so starry they made even hardened sailors a little poetic. And among these tales, there were monkey-storious tales, so strange, so oddly specific, they had to be true, or at least repeated until truth didn't matter. One of the most enduring legends is that of Barnaby the Gold-Toothed, supposedly a capuchin monkey. Barnaby was said to belong to the crew of the Gasping Widow, a ship infamous not for its piracy, but for how unlucky it was. Lightning strikes, failed raids, dramatic breakups between bosuns and their parrots, you name it. Then Barnaby arrived. Barnaby was captured during a brief stop along the Ivory Coast, traded for a jar of pickled onions and a painting of questionable taste. From day one, he caused chaos-tossing maps overboard, stealing the ship's hourglass, and once locking 3 sailors in the brig because he somehow got the key. And yet, things changed. Raids became successful. The crew hit 3 treasure ships in a row. The cook stopped burning the stew. Sailors started sleeping through the night. Morale soared. And they credited all of Ides, all of Ito Barnaby. The monkey was believed to be enchanted. Not just clever, but downright supernatural. The gold tooth? Rumor says it came from a chest of cursed Spanish coins the monkey selected himself. The crew melted one down and fashioned it into a cap for one of his canines after he broke a tooth biting a cannonball. Why was he biting a cannonball? You don't ask Barnaby questions. Other versions of the tale insist the tooth was stolen from a nobleman during a raid in Havana. Barnaby, they say, climbed up the man's coat, lifted the gold molar from his mouth while he snored, and returned to the ship with a wink. The tooth, however acquired, gleamed brilliantly. Sailors claimed it caught the moonlight and cast strange reflections. Some said it glowed when danger was near. Others believed Barnaby used it to hypnotize enemy captains. Again, historians roll their eyes, but pirate journals from the Gasping Widow make frequent mention of the captain's furry starseer. After Barnaby's arrival, the ship's fortune changed so rapidly that the crew grew superstitious. One sailor refused to make landfall unless Barnaby touched his boots first. Another carried one of the monkey's shed hairs in a locket. When a new recruit spilled Barnaby's water bowl, he was flogged not for the mess, but for endangering the streak. Barnaby, for his part, didn't seem to notice, or if he did, he reveled in it. He accepted gifts, rode on the captain's shoulder like a prince, and wore a velvet sash adorned with buttons he personally selected. They called it the monkey's chain of command. The story takes a turn, of course. Every legend does. During a raid on a merchant vessel near the Bahamas, Barnaby allegedly leapt from the crow's nest mid-battle, landed on the opposing captain's shoulder, and stole the man's compass. Not a metaphorical compass. The actual brass and glass navigation-defining compass. The captain was so flummoxed that he dropped his sword and surrendered. The crew of the Gasping Widow hailed Barnaby as their new leader, half jokingly. Mostly, he was given a title, Lord, Commander of Mischief and Navigation. Someone made a tiny tricorn hat. Someone else painted a portrait, now lost to time, or possibly hanging in a bar in Bermuda under the name Monkey Napoleon. Barnaby's story ends in ambiguity, like all great legends. Some say he vanished during a storm, swallowed by a rogue wave after releasing the ship's sails to save them from capsizing. Others insist he retired on a hidden island, ruling over a group of shipwrecked cats and writing memoirs in the sand. One particularly dramatic version claims he faked his death, escaped on a merchant ship, and lived out his days impersonating an old sea captain with a thick beard glued to his face. That one's probably questionable. But what's clear is this: Barnaby left a mark. For decades, monkeys on pirate ships were measured against him. Not bad, someone might say, watching a monkey steal a spoon, but he's no Barnaby. Even Tobias, delightful as he is occasionally compared to the gold-toothed one. And Tobias seems aware of the legacy. One night, he dug through a chest of mismatched trinkets and pulled out a single coin small, dented and vaguely golden. He held it up to the moon, then tucked it away, as if to say, "We don't need legends. I'm building my own." Because that's what monkeys did on these ships. They blurred the line between pet and omen, between comic relief and living folklore. And whether Barnaby existed exactly as the stories say or not, his tale still drifts on sea winds and sleepy dreams. You lean back now, eyes heavy, as Tobias yawns and curls into himself, tail wrapped just so. Maybe he dreams of treasure. Maybe he dreams of tossing hats into the ocean. Maybe, somewhere, the ghost of Barnaby swings from mast to mast, still looking for his next grand misadventure. The waves rock gently, and the stars above blink their approval. The sea has gone smooth, now dark as ink, soft as velvet. Somewhere below deck, a snore rattles through the timbers like a lazy drum roll. Above, Tobias dangles from a bit of sailcloth, one foot scratching his belly, the other clinging effortlessly to a fraying rope. He's humming, or something close to humming. It's more like a squeaky creak, perfectly in tune with the groaning wood. Tonight, the ship is quiet, but not solemn. Not yet. Because it's time to talk about something unexpected. Something almost too strange to believe. Monkeys in pirate punishment rituals. Yes, it happened. Occasionally, the ship's furry mascot wasn't just a jester, a thief, or a diplomat. Sometimes, Tobias or whichever monkey ruled the deck took part in pirate justice. Now, to be clear, monkeys were not punished in the way humans were. No one dared lay a real hand on the mascot, unless they had a particular fondness for finding tar in their boots for the rest of their lives. But monkeys witnessed punishment. They imitated it, and, in a few cases, they became curious little participants in it. Let's begin with the ritual of judgment. Many pirate crews held informal trials when discipline was required, usually on deck, sometimes in the galley, where the lighting was worse but the snacks were better. The accused, whether for theft, lying, or failing to tie a proper knot, would be brought before the crew, and witnesses would be called. And here's where the monkey came in. Several journals from the era mention the mascot sitting near the judges, usually the captain, quartermaster, and a rotating third person who drew the short straw. Tobias, for example, always insisted on perching on the barrel beside the captain. Not invited, he just did it. And when he wasn't allowed up there, someone inevitably overturned a plate, or a flag fell mysteriously into the sea. During trials, monkeys like Tobias became silent spectators, but not always silent. If the accused made a particularly bold claim, say, that he wasn't the one who accidentally tossed the rum ration overboard, it wasn't uncommon for the monkey to suddenly screech, cover his eyes, or throw a small object, a bit of fruit, a spoon, once a fish. Was it a coincidence? Some said no. Some believed the monkey had a nose for lies. One diary reads, "Tobias yawned thrice during McHenry's testimony. The man is surely guilty. The verdict: lashes reduced to a stern talking, to, and dish duty, and the mimicry, the mimicry. After punishments were carried out, usually mild, this was a crew, not a kingdom, monkeys would sometimes imitate them, not cruelly, just with eerie precision. A sailor gets tied to the mast for an hour. The monkey later wraps rope around a crate and taps it rhythmically, mimicking the sound of lash against wood. Unnerving? Absolutely. Funny? Strangely, yes. There's even an account from the sulking maiden of a monkey who held his own trials with stolen figurines. He'd line them up small wooden carvings from a Portuguese merchant ship and bop them on the head one by one while screeching and wagging a finger. The crew called it mini justice. They once found the figurines arranged in a tiny noose display and immediately agreed to postpone all real punishments that week. Historians still debate the meaning of these performances. Were they just playful mimicry? Or did monkeys pick up on the weight of human rituals and parody them in their own bizarre, banana-flavored way? There's no scholarly consensus, only awe. In at least one curious case, the monkey was considered the judge. A ship known as the Scarlet Eel documented a brief period where verdicts were rendered by watching how the monkey reacted. Two crewmates present their arguments. If the monkey leapt toward one, that man was assumed to be in the right. If the monkey ignored both and ran off with a wig, the trial was declared a draw. This lasted 3 weeks. Then the monkey bit the cook, and all trials reverted to human discretion. But sometimes, it got more ceremonial. One story from Port Royal half-truth, half-rum-fueled poetry tells of a monkey who was dressed in a crimson robe, placed upon a small stool, and handed a gavel made from a spoon glued to a stick. His job? To bang the gavel when the crew agreed someone was guilty. He never banged it, not once. But he did chew the handle into a heart shape and toss it into the ocean, which the crew interpreted as a call for mercy. These theatrics weren't just for laughs. In a world where order was loose and authority constantly shifting, ritual, however strange, provided structure. And the monkey, odd as it sounds, was often at the heart of it. A symbol of truth? Maybe. A distraction from real conflict? Definitely. Either way, he was part of the dance. Of course, not all monkey roles were dignified. Some ships used the monkey as an unofficial warning signal. Before punishment began, Tobias might be handed a small flag, which he would wave with gusto or eat. Both were considered acceptable omens. If he dropped it before the punishment ended, bad luck. If he flung it at the captain, good luck. For whom exactly, no one could say. There's one particularly vivid account from the Singing Curse, a ship with a flair for pageantry. Before punishments, the monkey would be paraded across the deck in full regalia. Usually, a curtain fragment and a crown made from bent forks. He'd be held aloft like a royal inspector, sniff the offender, and then either pat their head, forgiveness, or slap their boot, guilt. Again, entirely arbitrary, but the crew swore by it. You sit now at the edge of the deck, watching Tobias watch you. His eyes are half-lidded, but sharp. There's a piece of rope in his hands. He ties it, then unties it, then ties it again loose, precise, loose again. You wonder if he's thinking about something, rehearsing, judging. He blinks slowly, then tosses the rope at your feet. Verdict rendered. Was it a compliment? A warning? A sleepy goodbye? Hard to say, but one thing's certain. On this ship, the monkey's word may not be law, but it's definitely policy. The sails flap gently above as you lean back against the deck rail, legs stretched out, the wood warm beneath you despite the night air. Tobias is nearby, wrapped in someone's coat, like a very opinionated burrito. His tail peeks out the sleeve. A single eye watches you, judging, or maybe just sleepy. It's hard to tell with Tobias. By now, you've heard all manner of monkey lore. Outlandish legends, comedic rituals, seafaring spa days. But you might be wondering how much of this is actually true. Well, welcome to the messy, glorious debate between pirate myth and historical record. It's a bit like trying to find the truth in a tavern full of people who all swear they saw the monkey steal the governor's wig. Backwards, in the dark. While juggling, historians, bless them, have tried. They've combed through ship logs, letters, court records, even graffiti scrawled on prison walls. And yes, monkeys show up. Not often, not prominently, but just often enough to stir suspicion that all these tales might be rooted in something real. Let's start with what's confirmed. Exotic animals on pirate and naval ships were not uncommon. Parrots, monkeys, even small wildcats were traded and transported, especially in the Caribbean and West African regions. Traders knew they could fetch high prices in European, at least entertain the crew long enough to justify the food costs. One preserved ship's manifest from a captured French privateer in 1,711 lists. One monkey, chained, dressed, partial to dried fruits. Not a deep biographical sketch, but it's something. Another letter from a Dutch merchant warns of English rogues with a foul-mouthed parrot and a devilish monkey who bit 3 men and drank from my inkpot. Yet even with these tidbits, solid documentation is scarce. Why? Because pirates didn't exactly keep HR records. Their logs were often coded, cryptic, or filled with the barest essentials: wind direction, course headings, and sometimes amusing side notes like Simon lost another boot, suspect monkey. And that's where oral history and sailors' yarns step in. Pirates were storytellers. When they returned to port, or more likely, when one of their own landed in a tavern with loose lips and a loose wallet, the stories spread, embellished, expanded, decorated with sea monsters, ghosts, and yes, monkeys who could navigate by starlight. Historians still argue whether these stories were metaphorical. Was the monkey stole our map code for we got lost and needed a funny excuse? Or did a real monkey actually throw a chart overboard and then sit there looking pleased with itself for 6 hours? There's also the inconvenient truth that humans like to exaggerate, especially humans with access to rum, open seas, and no natural predators except each other and their own boredom. So, where does that leave Tobias? And Barnaby? And the infamous Inspector Flaps? Probably somewhere in the delicious middle. Take the tale of a monkey leading a crew to buried treasure by tugging on the captain's sleeve and pointing at a sand dune. No serious scholar would stake their reputation on it. But could a monkey drawn by a scent, or by sheer chance have scampered towards something shiny, only for the crew to interpret it as divine guidance? Absolutely. And what about the story of a monkey who testified in a pirate trial by mimicking swordplay and pointing at the accused? Sounds bonkers, right? Yet there are written accounts of monkeys imitating crew behavior to eerie precision, especially when surrounded by the same people, routines, and chaos day after day. So, maybe it happened. Maybe it didn't, but it could have. And in the absence of certainty, pirate culture filled the gaps with narrative. In many ways, monkey tales served a bigger purpose. They gave structure to the unstructured, a sense of humor to balance the brutal, a reason to laugh when you'd lost a sail, a crewmate, or the last crate of lemons to scurvy and seagulls. Tobias, sitting there now, polishing a spoon with your sleeve, don't ask how he got itis the story. Whether or not he ever saved the ship from a cursed squid or stole a priest's false teeth, another popular tale he could have. And in pirate logic, could have is close enough to truth. There's also the question of legacy. How did all these monkey tales survive? Partly through sailors' letters, but mostly through folk songs, oral tradition, and the garbled mess of 19th century fiction that romanticized pirates into charming rogues with perfect teeth and talking animals. By the time Treasure Island came along, the parrot had already become shorthand for pirate eccentricity. But they were still out there, lurking in the background, ready to steal the show. Or your sandwich. Some reenactment groups today even include monkeys as honorary crewmates, stuffed or otherwise. One particularly enthusiastic group in Nova Scotia has a wooden Tobias who's been aboard since 1986. He wears a monocle and gets dusted every Thursday. Other times, real monkeys show up in seaside legends, carved into pub signs, or immortalized in weather vanes perched atop port buildings. There's even a small pub in Cornwall called the Monkey's Lantern, where the story goes that a pirate monkey once led a rescue party by swinging a lantern through the fog. Do we believe it? Maybe not entirely. Do we want to? Absolutely. Because at the end of the day or night, as it is now, the line between history and myth on a pirate ship is like a tide mark, shifting, blurry, but always present. And Tobias? He doesn't care whether scholars believe in him. He's too busy right now stealing a bootlace and stuffing it into a mug. He is history. He is legend. He is the chaos we secretly love to root for. And as the ship drifts onward under a blanket of stars, you realize the stories matter. Even the embellished ones, especially the embellished ones. Because without them, the sea would be just water. But with them, it's a floating stage, and Tobias is the headline act. The night is deep now. The lanterns burn low, casting soft halos on the deck. The crew has quieted. A few murmur in their sleep. One lets out a snort like a foghorn. And Tobias is sitting beside a small pile of buttons, arranging them in a spiral like some kind of sacred ritual. You don't interrupt. You just watch. There's something reverent about it. And that, strangely enough, brings us to a part of the story most pirates never spoke of, aloud the final chapter of a monkey's life at sea. Because yes, eventually, even the fiercest, funniest, most biscuit-thieving mascots reached the end of their voyage. And what happened next? Surprisingly, something not unlike honor. Monkeys, after all, weren't seen as simple pets by these ragtag crews. They were family, fellow survivors. They'd shared storms, portside hijinks, sea shanties, and far too many questionable breakfasts. When a monkey died, it didn't go unnoticed. Let's start with the quiet ones. Some monkeys passed in their sleep old age, illness, or a storm too rough for even the most sea-hardened creatures. When that happened, the crew would gather, not always with ceremony, sometimes just with silence. A few men would wrap the monkey in sailcloth, tuck a bit of fruit or a stolen ring beside him, and gently lower him overboard. One captain wrote in his log, "Laid to rest our monkey, Pip. He kept us laughing through 4 winters. A finer officer I never served under." Simple, honest, and oddly beautiful. Other monkeys got more elaborate farewells. There's a well-documented account of a crew off the coast of Hispaniola who constructed a miniature coffin for their mascota monkey named Cap'n Wobble. It was carved from rum barrel staves, decorated with carved fish bones and bits of colored glass. The monkey was laid to rest during a sunset ceremony where each crewman said something he'd stolen from them. "He took my tobacco, aye," one sailor said, "but he also took my heart," the captain wept. Probably, historians still debate whether such ceremonies were common, or if they were rare, dramatic flourishes remembered only because someone happened to write them down. But one thing is certain, monkeys didn't just vanish. They left a hole. Some ships even built small shrines. Not shrines in the religious sense, but quiet little corners with a carved likeness, a favorite spoon, or even the monkey's hammock left hanging in the breeze. One ship nailed a tiny plank to the mast, reading simply, "Tobias, forever afloat." Other times, pirates buried their mascots on shore. A few Caribbean islands reportedly became resting places for beloved monkeys. In one case, a crew claimed a hilltop on an uncharted key, buried their monkey Sir Thistle, if you can believe it, beneath a crooked coconut tree, and built a ring of stones around the spot. They returned every year to toast him. Local legend on that same island now says coconuts won't fall on that hill. It's Thistle protecting his post. And yet, not every monkey received a solemn end. Some just disappeared, lost overboard during a storm, vanished during a raid, or, in one peculiar case, traded to a spice merchant in exchange for a crate of cinnamon and a novelty chess set. But even those stories carried weight. The memory of the monkey lingered. The crew might tell tales of when Tobias ran the galley, or when Beans stole the admiral's boots long after the monkey was gone. These memories became part of the ship's culture woven into the fabric of its identity. A new crew might never meet the monkey, but they'd hear the stories, see the scratched initials on the mast, or find the chewed-up spoon tucked into the map chest, and they'd know he was real. He mattered. And sometimes, the monkey came back. Not in ghostly form, exactly though there are those tales too, but as legend. Monkeys became omens. One ship believed that spotting a monkey on land meant good fortune at sea. Another crew swore that every time their compass spun oddly, it was Tobias saying, "Turn back." There's even the tale of the Sea Wasp, a small sloop that had never carried a monkey until one day a sailor brought aboard a tiny wooden monkey carved from driftwood. From that day forward, the ship never lost a mast, never missed a raid, and never found a rat below deck. Coincidence? Sure. Or maybe Tobias just found a new form. Monkeys also found a second life in art. You'll find their likeness scratched into barrels, etched on tankards, painted on tavern walls. Sometimes dignified, sometimes cross-eyed and covered in jam, but always remembered. One ship carried a carved figurehead of their late monkey Mascots snarling capuchin in a tricorn hat right up to its final battle, where the ship went down, figurehead and all. Divers later recovered it. It now rests in a maritime museum, still snarling. And then there are the tattoos. Pirates mark their bodies with all kinds of things. Anchors, daggers, lovers' names. But monkey tattoos were their own quiet club. A tail curled around a dagger. A tiny face peeking from a compass rose. A single spoon. Tobias lives on, inked into skin, sailing across time. Back on deck, Tobias stirs. He's still very much alive, of course, and apparently has just discovered someone's hidden sugar stash beneath the stairs. He emerges triumphantly, dragging a wrapped lump of sweetness twice his size. You watch him shuffle across the deck, victorious, tail high, eyes gleaming in the lantern glow. Someday, his time will come too, but not tonight. Tonight, he is still the legend in the making, the mascot in the flesh, the fuzzy monarch of mischief. And when he's gone, hopefully not for many, Moonshee's name will be scratched into timber. His story told in whispers. His spoons passed down like sacred relics. Because on a pirate ship, immortality isn't about gold or glory. It's about the stories you leave behind. And Tobias, well, Tobias is making sure his tail will never sink. The wind has turned mild again, brushing gently against your cheek like a breath from the stars themselves. Below deck, a lull has settled over the hammocks, interrupted only by the occasional murmur or the creak of a knee protesting another long day at sea. On the deck, Tobias is nestled in his hammockies, his own personal one wrapped in a blanket with the faint smell of peppercorns and old parchment. One paw flops lazily over the side. He's earned the rest. And now, as our journey winds down, we come to something you might not expect. The afterlife of the pirate monkey. Not in superstition or at sea, but right here, now, in our own world. In reenactments, pop culture, and the delightful absurdity of modern monkey fandom. Because the pirate monkey? He never really left. He simply climbed ashore, shook out his tail, and kept going. Let's begin with reenactments. All over the world, costumed enthusiasts gather to relive the golden age of piracy with astonishing commitment. They hoist flags, duel with rubber cutlasses, and drink suspiciously authentic beverages out of pewter mugs. And in more than a few of these communities, the pirate monkey remains part of the act. Sometimes, it's a stuffed monkey sewn into a vest, strapped to a shoulder, or perched on a barrel with an eye patch and a tiny mug. Other times, it's a puppet, masterfully operated and loaded with sass. In rare cases, it's a real monkey, carefully handled and often bewildered, standing in for Tobias, Beans, Barnaby, or one of the many other mascots who never quite left the decks of our imaginations. One reenactment society in the Florida Keys even has a position called Keeper of the Monkey. The role? To carry the plush Tobias, invent new monkey stories on the spot, and ensure the mascot receives daily bananas, which are actually gold-painted peanuts. The crew insists the monkey decides who wins the annual rum cake bake-off. The monkey, naturally, prefers the chocolate one. Beyond live events, pirate monkeys have wriggled into pop culture in subtler ways. You've probably seen them swinging across the screen in animated films, dressed to the nines in fantasy adventure games, or hiding in the background of pirate-themed amusement parks. They're never the main act, but they always steal the scene. Sound familiar? Even Treasure Island, though it favored parrots, planted the seed for the mischievous animal sidekick trope. And by the time pirates hit the silver screen in full force, monkeys had climbed back into the spotlight. Cheeky, fast, clever, and almost always outsmarting the adults. But the legend has evolved too. Modern stories often give pirate monkeys agency. They're not just pets anymore. They're scouts, spies, tiny anarchists who steer ships using a compass they definitely shouldn't have. One children's book even tells the tale of a monkey who captains his own ship of raccoons. It's nonsense. It's brilliant. Historians, of course, roll their eyes at all this. The real evidence is sparse, they say. The monkey mascot is an exaggeration, a literary flourish, a parrot's less documented cousin. And maybe they're right. But try telling that to the tattoo artist who's etched a grinning Tobias onto a sailor's shoulder, one paw holding a cutlass, the other flipping a coin. Or to the pub in Charleston with a hand-carved monkey figurehead behind the bar wearing a captain's coat and flanked by candle stubs. Or to the tourists in Devon who swear The weather vane, shaped like a monkey with a sword, moves before the storm comes in. Tobias lives on, not just in dusty books or seaside lore, but in using the way we love a rascal, in our instinct to name the office stapler after a rebellious gremlin, in the joy we take from a small creature causing big problems with style. Even online, you'll find monkey emojis sailing pirate ships, memes declaring them Employee of the Month, and handmade pirate monkey figurines for sale on crafty corners of the internet. Tobias, too, with Wi-Fi. And perhaps most touching of all, some modern ship-sailing vessels used for training, tourism, or historical outreach keep a monkey mascot on board. Not alive, mind you, but present. A small plush toy buckled into a seat. A crocheted monkey tucked into a life ring. A nod to tradition, to mischief, to morale. Because every crew, no matter how modern, knows the value of a good story. Of a symbol that reminds you to laugh, to stay unpredictable, to never trust the spoon rack again. You glance at Tobias, still sleeping. His tail twitches like he's dreaming of something daring another spoon to steal, another pocket to search, another legend to become. He's not just a monkey, he's an idea. A living reminder that life, especially on the sea shoaled, never be taken too seriously. And as the waves lap softly against the hull, you let your eyes close, lulled by the rhythm, the memory, and the knowledge that somewhere, in every port, someone's still telling monkey tales. Tales that begin the same way every time. Have I told you about Tobias, the monkey who ran the ship? And the answer, always, is not recently enough.